Okay, so the World of Warships tier list. This might be a little confusing, but we're going to be ranking each tier in the game based on the classes that I actually play, so Destroyer, Cruiser, and Battleship, and we're going to rate how good each class is at each tier in World of Warships based on the tier spreads, the ships it can face, the consumables they generally have, how easy and comfortable they are to play. So, hopefully this will become more understandable as we go on, but let's not dilly-dally. Let's get started straight away with tier 6. We're going to start with tier 6 destroyers. I'm going to put tier 6 destroyers in... you know what? I'm going to put tier 6 destroyers in A tier. I think there's some very good tier 6 destroyers out there. Of course, you've got stuff like Farraguts in the American tech tree, but then you've also got stuff like the T61, the German premium, which is very strong. And I think tier 6 destroyers are relatively comfortable to play because you start to get your utility for most lines at this point, and you start to get some of the unique features, but you can't face many ridiculous ships at tier 9, and you cannot face the absolute proliferation of radar that happens at tier 9. Fighting tier 8 ships as a tier 6 destroyer is still rough, but it's not as bad as some of the other parts we're going to talk about later. Tier 6 cruisers, on the other hand, I am not a fan of tier 6 cruisers because I find that your damage output is relatively low, whilst your chance of being popped is relatively high. I'm going to put tier 6 cruisers in between B or C. I think B tier, because there's still some relatively decent cruisers here. You've got stuff like Alba, which is relatively okay tier for tier. No, the British cruisers aren't great. This might be controversial. I'm going to put tier 6 cruisers down to C tier. I think that the battleship guns you can start to face here get a bit more scary, especially when you get up-tiered into a tier 8 match. You're against some really, really scary ships at that point. So I'm going to stick it into C tier. I might move it around later. I'll try not to, but we'll see. Tier 6 battleships now. I'm going to put tier 6 battleships in... another difficult choice. I'm going to put tier 6 battleships in A tier, I think, as well. Because tier 6 battleships are... Actually, you know what? Does it deserve an S tier? No, not an S tier. Tier 6 battleships are pretty good because, again, you are facing maximum of tier 8. And you also have a lot of squishy cruisers around. This is very much dependent on the nation, so let me know if you'd like me to do a tiers per class per nation tier list next. That will be like 2 hours long, but if you want it, I guess I'll do it at some point. Let me know in the comments. But I think that tier 6 battleships are pretty decent overall. You have some good options in there. Fuso for Japan. You have... what else do we have? Let's go take a quick look. You have... the German ones are Bayern's fine, Mackenson's okay. But for UK, Renown is pretty good. And then you also have quite a few premium tier 6 battleships that are pretty decent. West Virginia 41's pretty good, Mutsu's pretty good, Repulse is pretty good, Warspite is good, Dunkirk is okay, Friedrich is okay. You know what? Yeah, we're gonna stick tier 6 battleships in A tier for now. And I think they're going to stay there for now. We will see. Moving on to tier 7. We will start with tier 7 destroyers. Tier 7 destroyers are in an interesting spot because you start to see tier 9s. And there's a lot more radar at this tier. But you can still only see a maximum of tier 8 carriers, which is obviously annoying, but not as annoying as tier 10s are. So, I'm going to put tier 7 destroyers... sorry, excuse me. I'm going to put tier 7 destroyers into B tier, I think. There's still some very good options here. You've got stuff like Haida in here for the premium ships. And you've got some interesting tech tree ones. Like, again, I'm going to go back to the Americans. With the ships that they have. Yes, Mayhan is very good. I really enjoyed Mayhan the first time playing through. The Russians, Minsk is okay. Germans, I'm not so sure in hindsight, actually. You know what? I'm going to try and not make this video 50 years long. We're just going to stick tier 7 destroyers in B tier. Actually, just because of Hyder existing, we're going to stick it in B tier. Tier 7 cruisers. Now, this is where it would really benefit from having per nation. Because tier 7 cruisers, I think, become really rough to play because you lack the heal. Now, I think a lack of heal at tier 7 on a cruiser is really, really rough. Because especially stuff like fire damage just hurts way more than it would a tier 8 cruiser. And tier 7 cruisers, in a lot of cases, they don't get radar, they don't get the powerful hydro, they don't get the most powerful gimmicks that set would have. So there's a couple of exceptions. I would say, obviously, Belfast is very, very, very strong. But outside of that, and Fiji, the British cruiser, but outside of that, I'm going to put tier 7 cruisers in D tier, I think. They can face tier 9s with their big, powerful guns. They don't have heal for the most part. They don't have access to their gimmick for the most part. And they're generally not super powerful, I think, in the current matchmaker, which favors the higher tiers. So I'm going to stick tier 7 cruisers in D, with the exception of stuff like Atlanta, Belfast, that are really fun. But they are the exception rather than the rule to this tier, in my opinion. And this is all my opinion, so if you disagree, please let me know in the comments. I really love engagement, and it's totally not for YouTube's algorithm to prioritize my channel. Anyway, tier 7 battleships. I think tier 7 as a whole is in a pretty rough place, you know. I think tier 7 as a whole is in a rough place because you're just below tier 8. There's so many tier 8s due to the amount of premiums, and also people playing tier 9 premiums for the credit boosts. So, tier 7 battleships. I think I'm going to put tier 7 battleships in... Oh, I'm between B and C. I think I'm going to stick them in B, because you do have some very, very good tier 7 battleships. If we take a look at the premiums, Florida is really fun. You've got the Scharnhorsts, you've got Hood, you've got Rodney, you've got Nelson, just from the ones that I own here. Of course, Huga's very funny, Ashitaka's very good. Then if we look at the tech tree, you have stuff like Friedrich and Gneisenau, which are pretty good. We don't talk about Colorado. Nagato is annoying, but overall pretty good. Caracciolo is fine. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable sticking tier 7 battleships in B. In hindsight, I think I'm gonna move tier 7 destroyers down to C, and fight me about it later if you want, but that's where it's going. Now, we move on to tier 8. This is where things get interesting. Tier 8 destroyers. I think tier 8 is a very, very strong tier overall, because you still get to face tier 6s and tier 7 ships fairly often, but then you don't have to fight super ships at any point. You just have to fight tier 10s, which are, for the most part, relatively balanced. So, tier 8 destroyers, there's a lot of very, very good options here for tier 8 destroyers. If we take a look and filter through here, even just the premium ones that I have here, Harakaze is very, very strong. Cossack is very strong. Loyang is very strong. Orkan can be relatively strong. And then if we take a look at the tech tree, what do we have here? Merca can be good at what she does. We go through here, and the Americans, you have Benson, which is relatively good. You have Lightning for the British. Lightning is very good. The French destroyers start to get pretty good here. Le Fantasque is very fantastic. So I'm going to stick tier 8 destroyers in A tier, I think. You also get stuff like Kid, which I didn't mention earlier, with the heal. So, yeah, I'm going to go for A tier for tier 8 destroyers. Now, I will say here, you can see on my account, I may not have all of the lines unlocked. I have played pretty much every ship in the game at some point on previous press accounts. So, I do somewhat know what I'm talking about. But this is not meant to be every single ship. This is meant to be the class as a whole. There will be exceptions to every single part of this, as you may expect. Tier 8 cruisers. Tier 8 cruisers. Tier 8 cruisers. Now, it's been said that cruisers really suffer in World of Warships, and to some extent, I think that is definitely true. However, I think tier 8 is a pretty good spot for cruisers. You start to get your gimmicks in a lot of places, the more powerful radars. You get a heal, more importantly, at tier 8. Tier 8 cruisers, could they be the first S? They're not the first S. Tier 8 cruisers are going to go in A again. I'm trying not to make this list too repetitive. We can already see a pattern forming here, which is the destroyers and the battleships being stronger than the cruisers. Generally. But we're going to put tier 8 cruisers in A tier, I think, because you start to get those... really good heals. You get your utility, as I said, so we're going to stick it up there. Tier 8 battleships. So this is relative, remember, to everything else. I'm going to put Tier 8 battleships at B tier. Now, hear me out. Hear me out before you start writing. Tier 8 battleships are significantly weaker than Tier 10 battleships. Now, obviously, you're going to be saying that's really amazing insight. But overmatch becomes a much bigger problem here. Because there's so many big guns at Tier 10. You run into Yamato, of course. You can run into Incomparable. You can run into Shikishima. You can run into much more problems with overmatch than you can in a Tier 7 battleship, where you can only run into Musashi, even if you have 32 Boubao. But I'm going to stick Tier 8 battleships in B tier. And again, there are exceptions here. Massachusetts would be instant S tier. I would argue Champagne is either A or S tier. And if we go look at the tech tree for Tier 8 battleships, sorry, we look at the premiums here first. Lenin is, of course, very good, but not for sale anymore. But then you take a look at some others like Tirpitz. It's okay, but would you want to take Tirpitz into a Tier 10 game? Probably not. Would you want to take Anhel into a Tier 10 game? Probably not. Northcow's pretty decent. So I think people's perception of Tier 8 battleships is skewed by some of the more strong premiums like Massachusetts and Lenin. And there's some strong tech tree ships here, like North Carolina is very strong, Vladivostok is very strong, Amagi is pretty good. But then you also have ships such as Kansas in this tier. So, yeah. I think I'm relatively happy with sticking Tier 8 battleships at B tier. If I'm going to get mobbed after this, I'm very sorry, but I said what I said. Tier 9 destroyers. Tier 9 destroyers, I think, are also very good. Tier for tier, obviously much stronger than Tier 8 destroyers, but you can start to run into super ships. But I think, in general, Tier 9 destroyers are pretty strong. They're in a pretty good place. Let's go take a look and remind ourselves. Tier 9 destroyers. Of course, Kitakaze is in here, Bedham is here, Black is here, Somme, which is Jutland, is here, Groningen exists here, Jaeger, Paolo, ZF6. There's some very strong Tier 9 destroyers. Now again, the proliferation of radar is a problem, but with how strong a lot of the Tier 9 destroyers are, I think it's less of a problem. So, potentially controversially, Tier 9 destroyers are going to go in... They go in A tier or... No, I'm going to put them in A tier. I'm going to move Tier 8 destroyers out to B tier. In hindsight, I think that Tier 8 destroyers should go in B tier more than anything else. Because I would much rather have a Tier 9 destroyer in a Superships game than a Tier 8 destroyer in a Tier 10 game. So that's sort of the scale that I'm weighing this on. Sort of. Tier 9 cruisers. Now, again, this is another thing of contrast. If we go take a look at Tier 9 cruisers that exist in the game. You have some very strong options here. Alaska, really good. Kronstadt, used to be, maybe still really good. Tianjin, of course, is pretty decent. Cosmaminin, very strong. Azuma, very annoying to fight against and pretty strong. But then if you take a look at the tech trees, what have we got here? Buffalo, Seattle, meh. Buffalo's pretty good. Seattle, I don't think is that great. Japan, we have Ibuki, fine. Takahashi, fine. Germany, Rune, Manteuffel. Manteufel's really good. Rune is meh. It's around there. Neptune, I would argue, is worse than both Minotaur and Edinburgh tier for tier. Drake is... It's a British heavy cruiser. It's not a fair comparison. Brindisi is pretty good. I think we're going to stick Tier 9 cruisers in C tier overall. Now, okay, I'm sorry. Don't attack me. I think they belong in C tier overall because there's such a big jump from Tier 9 cruisers to Tier 10 cruisers that it's actually insane. Like, if you think about so many of the lines, the Tier 10 gets a massive jump in so many different ways. Now, Tier 9 cruisers do benefit from the strong premiums, like we mentioned. Stuff like Alaska, stuff like Kronstadt. But I think overall, tier 9 cruisers are not in a super strong place in World of Warships at this time. Cruisers in general struggle right now with, especially with how good battleships are getting with the European battleship line with their radar and high speed and torpedoes and whatever else. So, with the exceptions of stuff like Alaska, tier 9 cruisers are in C tier, in my humble opinion. Tier 9 battleships, on the other hand, I think this is my first S tier. I'm going to put tier 9 battleships in S tier. This may be controversial, but I have a couple of reasons why tier 9 battleships belong in S tier. Reason number 1 is Iowa. Iowa is still ridiculously strong, even after all of this time has passed. One of the oldest high-tier battleships in the game, but still, in my opinion, one of the best. Sovietsky Soyuz is also still relatively decent. If you look at the British, we have stuff like Duncan, which is pretty good. And then if we go back towards the premiums, there's some truly ridiculous options at tier 9. Georgia, ridiculously strong. Missouri, very, very strong, of course. Jean Bart needs no introduction. Roussillon that just came out, very, very good. Giuseppe Verdi, very strong, very fun. Sun Yat-sen, very tanky, very strong, very fun. Victoria, it's got a burst fire on a battleship, very good, very fun. Tai Hang, accurate Slava, very good, very fun. I think there's such a good set of tier 9 battleships that are very, very strong, especially when you consider the frequency you get into tier 7 matches while playing tier 9. I think tier 9 battleships are in a very, very, very strong place. Of course, you get the occasional match where you're pulled into a super ship game or you're pulled into a mostly tier 10 match and you get farmed a bit by cruisers. But overall, tier 9 battleships are a very good time to play, and I think they belong in our first S tier of this video. Again, sue me in the comments, fight me, this is my opinion. I'll do a follow-up if you want with breaking down my nation, because I think that'd be more interesting, but tier 9 battleships, S tier, in my opinion. Destroyers. Destroyers, tier 10 destroyers. I'm gonna have to go, I think I'm gonna have to put them in S tier as well. I think tier 10 destroyers are very, 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 very strong. Now, this depends on when you're playing. If you're playing on the weekends, they're probably down in like B tier because there's so many more carriers, so many more people who are, let's just say, otherwise skilled than World of Warships. So if you're playing at the weekend, they'll be down in B tier. But generally, all things considered equal, I believe Ben Franklin said that, tier 10 destroyers are in S tier in my very humble opinion. I think that tier 10 destroyers are very, very, very ridiculously strong. Just from my experiences of playing stuff like... What the hell? Oh, yeah. Playing stuff like... Radar mod... Legendary mod Yu Yang. Very, very, very strong ship. Trump, very strong, very funny. Vampire 2, strong, funny. Kleber, strong and funny. Sherman, strong and funny. Even Hayate now, strong and funny. That's also something else to consider with tier 10, is those legendary mods. Like I said about Kleber. If we're considering normal Kleber... Sorry. Yu Yang. If we're considering normal Yu Yang, it's probably a B or so tier. But with legendary mod, it becomes an S tier. So those have to be considered here as well. Then if we look at the rest of the tech tree, Harugumo is probably a very, very strong ship. Gearing is still relatively strong. And then, of course, you have stuff like Elbing, which is very strong. Grozovoy is really strong. Daring is really strong. So I'm going to stick with S tier for tier 10 destroyers in World of Warships. Come at me. Fight me. Tier 10 cruisers. This is an interesting one. This is a very interesting one. Now, tier 10 cruisers, you get a lot of utility. Think of the long action radars. Think of the super heals. Think of the DPM. Stuff like Hawaii, Bremen, Petropavlovsk, Minotaur, Colbert. I don't want to make this just a case of strength, because then tier 10 ships will be at the top. It should be relative to other tiers. So we have tier 9 cruisers relatively low in C tier. Tier 10 cruisers are a massive upgrade on tier 9 cruisers. I'm going to put tier 10 cruisers in... I'm torn between A tier and B tier. Are tier 10 cruisers on the same level as tier 8 cruisers? No. Oh, do I move tier 8 cruisers down to B tier then? Do I want the entirety of tier 8 in B tier? I am not sure. We're going to leave it like this for now. No, this feels wrong. I'm going to move tier 8 cruisers down to B tier and put tier 10 cruisers at A tier. You just have so much utility. Now, again, this depends on who is playing the ship and how well they are playing it. But tier 10 cruisers, come on, man. You have stuff like, of course, Hawaii, Bremen, Salem/Des Moines, Smolensk, Minotaur. Marseille is relatively strong. Venezia deletes destroy is so much better than anything else can. Napoli is there for coal. Then if we look at the tech tree, we have stuff like Zao is really strong. Of course, like we said, Des Moines, Worcester can still be strong. Nevsky with that long radar. Petro for that, again, long radar and tankiness. Hindenburg still holds up after this time. Adalbert is still really good as well. It's all just a really fun, strong set of ships. Now, of course, you are still cruisers, and cruisers still suffer overall in some way. However, I think that they're relatively good overall. Battleships. Tier 10 battleships. Now, this may be controversial. We're going to put tier 10 battleships in A tier. Yeah, it has to be A tier, right? Yeah. Tier 10 battleships are very, very, very strong. They're very good ships. Or do they belong in S tier? No. No, this is fine. I'm so torn. A weird part of me wants to put them down in B tier. I don't think they belong in B tier. I think that's just a reflection of the average player's skill level that would put them down there. I think overall, on balance, would I consider tier 10 battleships to be stronger than tier 10 cruisers in game impact and tier for tier performance? I would say it's a very difficult thing to say. Most of the time, they are a significant step up compared to their tier 9 counterparts, or in almost every instance. This is the most difficult portion of the list, and this is probably the entry that's going to get the most controversy. Vermont, Schlieffen, of course, No, they have to go. You know what? They're even going into S tier because of stuff like Libertad, because of all that kind of stuff that's in the game. Tier 10 battleships are going to go in S tier. My little deliberation with myself is going to look very stupid there. I completely forgot Libertad existed. S tier for tier 10 battleships. Now we're going to get into Superships, and this is going to be based on their relative credit cost. So, of course, you're always going to be losing credits. Are you having much of a bigger impact on the game than the tier 10 counterpart, considering how much more you're paying for the privilege and also introducing Superships on the enemy team for that same trade-off? So, destroyers, I think I'm going to put D tier. I think the super destroyers are just not worth it over the tier 10 counterparts in almost any circumstance. They are generally bigger, they are slower, they have high detectability, and in this meta where destroyers are so hell-bent on staying unspotted, as they should be, I think tier 11 supership destroyers belong down in D tier. Cruisers. Now, if this was like back in 2023 when Conde was a thing at its height, this would be S tier. I think now I'm going to put them in C tier because there's some really strong examples still, and they are still really strong overall, but compared to tier 10 cruisers, you don't get that much more utility. The funny buttons can be funny, but they're not often that funny. So they are going to stay down in C tier. And super battleships, I think we're going to put in either... Yeah, I'm going to put them in B tier. They are definitely stronger in some instances. Like, for example, Satsuma is very strong with the funny button that it has access to. Main can be very strong. As much as you don't see it that much, Ushakov can have a ridiculous amount of health if you build your captain for it. So I am going to stick the super battleships in D tier. So there you go. That's my final tier list. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and let me know if you're interested in seeing the ships per tier, per nation tier list at some point in the future. And let me know what other World of Warships tier list you would like to see. Maybe you'd like to see a map tier list. Maybe you'd like to see a strategy tier list. Maybe you'd like to see a, I don't know, commander attractiveness tier list. I don't know. You're the boss. Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching. And stick around for the next World of Warships guide. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. Do a kickflip, make me a pizza, and tell your mother that you love her. See you next time.